And oh, I see us. We're live. Hello, everybody. This is Book Club hosted by Heather Skinner. Thank you all for hanging in. Sorry we had some tech issues, but we are here now and happy to be here. I am your host. I am Heather Skinner. I am a pre-published author and a homeschooling mother, and I am here with my daughter, Gemma, who's an avid reader, and she always gets to ask the first question. And we are here today with the co-authors of You Will Be Peter. We have Jerry Lathan, and we welcome back Steve Manchester as well. Thank you so much for being here, guys.
Thank you for having us.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Oh, we're excited. Gemma and I were just reminiscing when I started this book club 3 years ago now, and she was so tiny when she met you, Steve, and she's 9 now.
Yeah, wow, 9 years old. Wow.
Yeah. 9, and she gets to ask you another question, which is exciting, right? She actually has 2 questions for you today. So I will let you get that started. Go ahead.
Did Santa really read your book?
She saw your picture with Santa reading your book, and she wanted to know. She's very excited.
I'll tell you, Gemma, he took a picture with it, right? So he definitely has the book. I hope he read it, or he read pieces of it. But yeah, I mean, we're excited, right? Santa's got a copy of the book, so you can't ask for anything more than that.
Yeah, he is busy this time of year, so he probably hasn't gotten back to us yet.
That's a good
He's got a lot on his plate for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, but it's exciting.
It's true. Your review from Santa probably won't come in until after Christmas, I assume.
Right.
You got to give him some time.
Yeah, I got to give him some time.
All
right, and you had another question for them too, right?
Yeah. Were you guys best friends who decided to write a book together?
Jerry, you want to take that one?
Let me see to make sure I understood. Did you say were we best friends or close friends? Was that the question?
Best friends.
Best friends. No, we had not met before. The story is that I was looking for someone to help me write this book because I have this story in my mind and I've done all this research and I really wanted to do this. And I realized I needed help with writing. And so I began to search and I interviewed a number of some very successful authors and people who'd written really good books who might want to collaborate with me on this. And I really pitched it to them until I found the right person. And when Stephen and I met, I just tell you, it was awesome. It was I guess kind of instant. We knew that this was the right collaboration. I think Stephen came down to Alabama to meet with me and spend some time with me, knowing that he was going to do this. But I don't want to speak for him, but I think I can say I've heard him say it enough now. And we've gone from being friends who didn't know each other yet to he calls me brother and I call him brother, and we stay in touch about everything because we really did bond in the process of uncovering this story and getting to tell this story. And that's what we did. It's not a story we made up or a story that we own. Everybody sort of knows the story, but we came together to get the privilege of telling what I think is one of the most amazing stories ever. So no, we didn't know each other until about 2 years ago, but we've become very close friends since then.
That's a great question, Gemma. I got to tell you, there's different times in your life, right, where you have this opportunity to do something bigger than yourself, right? So when Mr. Lathan contacted me and I went down there to meet him, to his point, I knew right away. And it's been a blessing. It really, really has for the two of us to become very close friends, to become brothers. And, you know, just as importantly, to put a book like this out into the world and be able to share it with everybody. So that we can, you know, come on and talk to you and your mom about it, which is fantastic.
Cool.
Great question, Gemma. Good job.
Thanks.
Gemma, you're going to be taking over your mother's job. So.
That's right. She's got this, right?
Yep.
And what do you say?
Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you. Nice girl. Very nice.
Job.
All right. Gemma's going to head out, and then we're going to keep going on. I'm just going to go ahead. I've been trying to look and make sure that everything is live. It looks like we're good. And I'm seeing that we have someone commenting. So I just wanted to say a quick hi to Michelle. And I'm so glad you're excited. Thanks for watching, Michelle. And let us know, everybody watching, now that Gemma's asked her questions, please pop your questions and comments into the chat. I will be checking periodically so that we can ask your questions. And also, it will give us an opportunity to pick a random name at the end, because Jerry and Steve are very graciously offering a giveaway today. So anywhere in the domestic US, they will send one copy of You Will Be Peter, and we'll be picking that randomly at the end from everybody. I'll pick one name with Gemma. I'm sure she'll be my helper. We'll do the old school style raffles ticket, write your names down and pick one for the winner. So, yes, perfect. Everyone put in your comments.
It'll be signed by both of us as well.
That's great.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
That is very cool. Thank you so much for offering that, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we appreciate your audience. Thank you for having us.
Aw, yeah, thank you for hanging out with our book club today. And I know you guys were planning on reading an excerpt as well. Before you do that, I wanted to give you guys a proper introduction too. So Jerry, you are a contractor by trade, and this is your very first book ever, correct?
Yes. Yes, that's right. I do.
Perfect. And then
historic preservation restoration work is our stock and trade. That's what we do. We restore historic landmark buildings. Many times names you would know, I might add. So
that has to be amazing to be on the other side of that. And then it must really connect into your writing, right? Do you see anything like that you're restoring that was a part of your writing?
Not anything that's a part of the biblical story. I mean, we don't have anything in Alabama that's that old, of course, but yeah, there's a great story that came from my trip to Israel, where some of my expertise in early stonecraft and how buildings were built and the foundations helped the archaeology team in Bethsaida actually locate one of the earliest known chapels or churches dedicated to Simon Peter. And so they pretty much knew what they had, but they were missing a piece of the puzzle, and I helped them put one piece in. I'm not taking too much credit here, but that's pretty amazing. 2,000 years later, to find something that that's how this worked, and it helped these guys who are archaeologists but didn't necessarily understand the building of foundations unlock that puzzle was kind of nice. It was very, very exciting. I've never seen a PhD archaeologist, very learned, kind of an academic guy, just kind of lose it and scream and dance like someone at a concert. He was so excited. So yeah, there is some connection. There's some overlap. Absolutely. If you love history, you love history, whether it's buildings or stories or whatever.
If I can jump in, I will say this, Heather, right? You know, Jerry's passion for history bled through from the first minute I met him, right? But what was also very impressive is his insistence on accuracy, right? So the research, we dive in and then we dive deeper, and I'm sure we'll get into the time and whatnot, but those two things coupled together made him like the perfect collaborator for what it is that I do.
Yeah, has to be
amazing.
Authentic. Has to be authentic. There's nothing in the
book,
and
I can already tell like your passion.
Yeah, there's nothing in this book that I can't explain literally why we think it's there, whether it's literally from the Bible or it's just inferred and strongly, this must have happened or some form of it happened, that we create a dialogue. But we don't just make up stories. It's all directly derivative of what we know from the historical record. And that's important.
That is, and that's absolutely incredible that you put that much time and passion into it and what you created. I haven't read it all yet, but I'm looking forward to finishing the book and giving you guys a review as well. But I can already tell your writing styles together are amazing, like just what I've read so far. And then to also make sure to give Steve an intro. Steve, you are the author of 25 books, I believe, and counting, right? And you are a veteran, and we had the pleasure of featuring your book, The Menu, 3 years ago.
Right.
I've also seen your movie adaptation, which was so well done, of the Thursday Night Club.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was amazing. It was so beautiful to watch. Very well done. And I believe now, I think, was your daughter in that as well? Does she have?
Yeah, she was. She was. So the exciting part of that is, all of this stuff is super fun, right? It's a ton of work, but it's a lot of fun. But it's a lot more fun when you can share it with people that you love, right? So when Bella, we ended up going to Connecticut where they filmed it, and Bella ended up singing one of the songs on the opening track and then the closing track. And Gloria Gaynor was also in the film, and Bella was able to, have a cameo with her, which is really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool to see. Very exciting.
Yeah.
So definitely amazing to have you guys here. And I'm seeing some questions coming in. So I'll jump to that quick.
Sure.
Let's see. Michelle is one. How did you decide to collaborate and create this book together?
I'll take a half of that, and Steve, I'll let you kind of clean up at the end.
Sure.
I've had this book in my mind for some time. It's actually begun in my head as a movie, as a motion picture. I had a background in that, which I won't go off into now, but I was involved in film production for 7 years, which led me to wonder what makes a really great movie and what makes a great story. And sorry, you can probably hear my clock going off here in London, but it's 10 o'clock there. It's over. So I always thought I'd have personal affinity with Simon Peter, and I wanted to tell his story, and I thought it should be in the form of a movie. And I kept trying to write a script or hire a script writer, and they kept asking me about this book that had to be the foundation of the story. And so I went looking for the book. I thought, I'll buy the rights, I'll buy the movie rights, I'll figure this out. And there really wasn't one that I thought told the story the way I wanted to tell the story from Simon's eyes. And so I began to try to find a way to write a book, and I began to write it myself, and I realized I needed help. And so to answer Michelle's question, how do we come to collaborate on it? I began to look for someone who is a professional writer, someone who's a great storyteller, and I found Stephen. Stephen?
So the cool part is I get contacted, and, Jerry and I think we talked once or twice on the phone, and I ended up flying down to Mobile, right, to Alabama to meet him. And I have to tell you, most people think that being a writer is like this very romantic, right, like type of lifestyle. And to be honest with you, it's a lot of work. If you're doing it right, you're grinding it out, right, as you know, Heather, right? So, but we spent a week together that was, it's hard to even explain it. And it's one of the coolest parts of the backstory. But he and I spent a week storyboarding more than half of this book in a cabin on land that was owned, by his family generation. So it was just so cool. I remember getting on the plane coming home thinking, we have a ton of work ahead of us, but man, isn't this cool, right? Like it was a blessing, right? That he reached out to me. It was a blessing that I accepted. And I was excited about, the work because it was good work. And we just got at it, and we stayed at it till we got it right.
Yeah, that took another couple of years, but we got it.
Right. Yeah,
That's
we got it
amazing.
right. We did.
Well, with all of the research you had, it must have been just such a task. Like, how did you go about deciding what to edit from the research you had and your starting point and everything? Was that hard to nail down?
Well, if I can start it, Jerry, right? So,
Sure.
so Jerry had done 10 years of research before he even gets there, right? So obviously by helping him to write this, I needed to immerse myself into it as well. But I thought the linchpin with this book working was it had to be character driven, right? So a lot of what Jerry spent time on was him trying to explain, listen, this is my vision. This is who Peter is. This is Peter's brother. Peter's best friend is John. His brother is James. And then we started to kind of flesh out the fellowship, right? But what happens is, as you know, as a writer, you start to pile it on. So it's political context, it's scene setting, it's, but really this is a character driven work where, you might do 6 months of research and use 3 or 4 pieces of it, but it's important that you had done, so that's kind of where we were at. But for me, it was really about letting characters drive the story. Jerry?
Yeah, and I would like to add a little bit there that beyond that, we really got to the end, and I think we'd had the manuscript largely written. We had the story down. We had decided how to start, how to finish, what the dramatic rise and the all of the swings in the story were going to be, and how it would be told, and the ending. The ending was interesting because we spent a lot of time on several different forms of that. But where do you stop telling the story? But then I just told Steve, I said, I've got to go to Israel. I haven't been. I need to know. I don't feel like we've got what I believe needs to be in the story, the flavors, the smells. I want you to, when you hear me describe, when we describe a date orchard and understand how important that fruit is in their diet, the sea, the smell. The sea doesn't smell like the ocean. It's actually a freshwater lake, and the Jordan River reminded me of a river I grew up near in Alabama. The smells of fresh water and that mist that comes off in the morning, the shimmering of grain in the fall, and the way the fields look, and just I told Stephen, I said, I got to go. We got to get he calls it finer brushes, a term I learned. Yeah. So we've got the painting almost done, but the little touches,
Right.
that's where that came in right at the end. And from that trip, we came back and I began to work with him and say, no, we need to talk about how the olives are processed and how they're smelled, why you select them at the time of the year that you do. And the fruits and the vegetables and the things that were there, how they make a fire when they're camping, because they traveled and they built a fire most nights because it's cool in the night, where the wind comes from in the evening as the sun goes down over the Sea of Galilee. Those are things that make you feel like you're there. And that was I thought the taste and the smells and the sounds, those are the fine brush points that after the research was done, made it real.
Yeah, and to me, that was the exciting part of it, Heather, right? Like our job, Jerry and I collectively, was to put the reader right. If you don't feel like you're walking beside Jesus and his disciples, then we weren't on our game, right? So it was layers and layers and layers. But those finer brushes at the end it was fantastic because you're close to the finish line, right? It was really cool, all of it.
That's amazing. Like, what was that like to translate all of that? Like, obviously you were writing your parts and then also translating those feelings and sights to Steve so that it could go into the collaboration that he was writing on his end. Like, what was that like? How did you just sit down and have those conversations? Like, this is what I've observed. This is what it smelled like.
We were back and forth. Like, we started with the storyboard. So we were in person for a full week. Like I said, more than half of the book kind of like framed out. We get that all framed up. I end up coming home, but we were, several times a week, back and forth, right? And then if I wrote something, I'd kick it over. He changed some things up. So we were just back and forth with it, and it just worked. I mean, we ended up getting a rhythm. Because, I've been at this a long time, and sometimes collaborations, I hear other writers, hey, it doesn't work, That was not the case here. There had to be a higher power at work, as he literally was. You need to go this way with it and go that way and realize, and then come back with something. Yeah, that's what I wanted. So it was cool. It really worked out.
Yeah, it did. And I think you'll hear it. I think you're going to have Stephen read an excerpt from the wedding at Cana. And I think you'll hear the description. You'll see and put you in that scene. And that's a great point where you begin to hear and feel the details we tried to make sure we had in there so that I want you to see yourself there. That's the whole point of the book. Everybody knows the story. Everybody knows what happens. But what if it was you there? What if it was, so many people have told me that it's changed their perspective. They understand it. I tell you what, it helps you feel better about yourself as a person of faith, because if you think you don't always understand, fine, that's good. That's okay. Simon Peter spends 3 years looking at Jesus in the face, and he still didn't always get it. He still couldn't figure out what's going on. So if sometimes you're not sure exactly what your next move is or what you've done is, it's okay. Jesus always got that little smile, and that he smiles with his eyes at one point in the book where he looks back at Peter and he doesn't say anything. He just has this knowing look. I want everybody to picture that. I want them to look at Jesus is looking at you, and he knows what you're doing. It's okay. Even if it's not right, he'll go, okay, let me tell you one more time. He does that with Peter over and over. But anyway, maybe I set you up there for the reading.
That's
I like
perfect.
it. That's a nice
Yes, that's
segue.
the perfect setup, please.
Well,
Yeah, you want to
let
show
me-
the beautiful cover too, so everyone
Yes.
can see it before you read the excerpt.
I have to say this. I mean, I'll go out and, we'll do signings and appearances, presentations, and everybody talks about the cover, right? And, I've done a lot of books. I mean, this cover is absolutely stunning, right? And Jerry, I don't know if it was Terry or Brittany. I mean,
It was my daughter and my wife in collaboration that came up with it. Give them credit. That's who came up with this.
Yeah, so you will be Peter, right? Which, when you think about it, you will be Peter, right? And Jerry will get into that later, but that kind of explains the entire plot, right? So we'll get into that. But if I may, this is from chapter 4 called Six Stone Jars. I love that we actually titled the chapters. They seem a little random until you get to the end of the chapter, and then you understand. But there's a lot of the feedback that we received, Heather. This is really, the first 3 chapters are building the characters and the fellowship, right? And this is where everything starts to take off, right? And the last thing I'll say before I start the reading is bear in mind that, 90 or better than 90% of this book is told through Peter's point of view, right? So it's super important to know that, here's Jesus talking and acting and doing his thing, but Peter's right there with him, and he's witnessing all of it. So chapter 4, Six Stone Jars at Cana, Galilee. And I will try to do this in my best Midwestern accent. Here we go.
That's not going to happen.
All
Straight out of Boston.
All 6 travelers arrived in the village of Cana late that Wednesday afternoon. As they traversed the final hill, the valley revealed more orchards and crop fields. Galilee really is beautiful, Simon confirmed. Hopefully, its vineyards produce wines that are just as fine. He was still smiling as they grew closer to the houses huddled together on the hillside. As they approached the village, the sound of children's laughter and joyful conversations were intermixed with the loveliest music. Even a braying donkey sounded happy. Simon was marveling at the masonry workmanship of the larger buildings, carved from limestone and granite, when Jesus announced, "It appears that we've arrived in time." The rabbi's smile revealed that he wasn't surprised. The traditional wedding procession from the bride's father's home to the bridegroom's was underway. While the minstrel troupe played at the front of the convoy, a squad of servants handed out dates to children along the road and wine to those of a more seasoned age. A young girl about 15 years old, her dark curly hair protruding from behind a white bridal veil, walked alone. Some of her relatives carried sprays of flowers, while others bore lit torches. Wonderful, Simon thought. He loved his Jewish customs and celebrations. Dusk was starting to creep in as the parade's onlookers clapped and praised the bride's semi-concealed beauty. Jesus, Simon, and the others applauded before joining the back of the line, proceeding on to the bridegroom's home, where the young man would carry his betrothed over the threshold of their new marital home. Upon arrival, Jesus gestured for his disciples to remove their sandals at the outer door before proceeding on to the courtyard, which was being used as the reception hall. From the first step in, Simon was impressed by the stone courtyard, which had been decorated for the great celebration. Adorned in ornamental rugs and cushioned couches, low tables were arranged for guests to dine. Each person would be expected to lay on one elbow with their feet positioned away from the table. While servants scurried to and fro, carrying food and drink, Simon and his brethren washed their hands and feet, complying with the precepts of the ancient law. Upon drying their extremities, each was officially welcomed with a cup of water drawn from one of the large stone jars. The sweet notes of a talented musical duo permeated the warm air, the harp and flute creating a simple but elegant symphony. Quenching his thirst, Simon looked around. Flowers, he noted. There are flowers everywhere. He nodded his appreciation. They've turned this courtyard into a garden. Beyond a table overlaid with bowls of fruits and nuts, even a stack of sweet date cakes, Simon spotted the intricately decorated hoopah. Ivy, flowers, and greens were wrapped around 4 legs that had been fashioned from seeded timbers, approximately 8 feet in height. It was just wide enough to host the bride, bridegroom, and officiating rabbi. The entire wooden frame was covered in a canopy of flowers, yellow, white, pink, and red, which had been strung together to create breathtaking strands of garland. The sight of it instantly brought Simon's thoughts back to his wife. No, he scolded himself, quickly pushing the melancholy out of his head. I'm here now, and I need to be here, and she understands. Catching the first whiff of roasting lamb, Simon turned to see Jesus and an older woman locked in a lengthy embrace. The disciple needed no introduction to understand the scene. She's his mother.
I was muted.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that was amazing. Thank you so much for reading that. And Jerry, thank you for holding up the visual during the read too. The way you guys write, I could visualize everything. It was so vivid.
That's fantastic.
That's so amazing. Thank you for doing that.
And, I tell you, when Jerry and I wrote that, so obviously you go on to meet, Jesus' mother Mary and the apostles meet her. But the whole time we're writing it, we know that, you're planting a seed for a woman who's going to suffer great anguish, right, at the base of the cross. So a lot of this stuff, if you're writing it, it's really planting seeds for later on down in the story.
Yes.
Yeah,
and you do that very well.
Well, we wanted the reader to picture what it would be like if you didn't know Jesus's mother and you identify her by the way Jesus treats this woman. And we don't say it. You listen. I mean, Simon, he just looks at her and says, "Oh, that's his mother." He understands the look, and so many ladies who've read the book have told us how they just plant themselves in that. Especially if they have a son, they say, "I could just see," and for the first time ever, I thought, what it must have been like to be Mary and know who Jesus is. But the world knows Jesus for a lot of for some, but that's her son, that's her boy. And she's looking at him, and remember, he's just come out of the desert for 40 days and nights, and he's not been eating well. So what does any good Jewish mother do? You got to eat. You got to eat. What are you doing? So he didn't read this part, but I've always loved this since I was a teenager. I've always wondered, did Mary actually say anything when Jesus says to her, it's not my time? Because she tells him they're running out of wine, and everybody knows the story, so I'm not giving anything away. And Jesus says, "Oh, it's not my time. I can't do this now." And the Bible doesn't record what happened next, but everybody has a mother. And so was it just a look?
Right.
I mean, I don't know what Jesus's middle name was, but did she say Jesus somebody? Or how did that exactly happen? It's not recorded, but clearly she's still the mother. I mean, you may be the son of God, but you're my boy. And she gives him a look or a word, and Jesus says, "Yes, ma'am." It's basically, he says, "Yes, ma'am," to his mother, as all good boys should. And he says, "Bring 6 stone jars over here, and let's take care of this.
Let's get it done."
So
I love that thought you put into it.
I've had
I know,
that picture in my
when
head since I was a child.
Yes. I
Don't
just
tell your mother no. Some things you don't tell your mother no. And so even Jesus had to say yes to his mother.
It's so great too, because everyone will be able to connect to that relationship on one side or the other of that. Mm-hmm. And I know when I became a mom, it does, when you start reading books, those relationships, you really clock that, and then you feel them differently than you would have read if I read them before I became a mom. It would have resonated different with me. So it's really cool that you have all of that relationship so well thought out, and that people will be able to feel it on every angle of it. It's really beautiful.
Again, we want you to see yourself in the story.
Right.
You can relate to one of these characters. Everyone that relates to someone here.
And I'm going to add briefly to that. I'll tell you that the most joyous thing to me with the feedback that we've received, Heather, right, is that you're reading a story from Simon Peter's point of view, and then suddenly, to Jerry's earlier point, right, Jesus looks at him and smiles, right? And suddenly, at some point in the book, Jesus isn't looking at Peter and smiling. He's looking at you, right, the reader, because you now see yourself in Peter, and it's, oh my goodness, I'm with him. I'm walking with him and hearing him, and I can feel it, and it's that real relatable type of situation that we created.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. It just reaches right through you and captivates you in a book. Right. That's amazing. Amazing. You guys are like a dream collaboration. You both have such a great way of bringing all this together. It's beautiful. I'm going to pop up a next question. Let's see. Michelle is wondering, Steve, what is your favorite book of all that you've written?
You're going to think I'm joking, right? Because it's all roads have led to You Will Be Better. I did a presentation the other night, and somebody was asking me about an earlier book, and I said, if that book didn't happen for me, right now that I've gotten older, I connect the dots. But truly, I almost feel like I've been training for 30 years, right, to get to a place where Jerry Lathan calls me and says, "Hey, do you want to knock this thing out together?" And I finally have the skill set to do it. He's got the research, the knowledge, and it really is. And I think the hardest part of this project is where to go from here, right? So I've written 25 books, but we just wrote a book about Simon Peter, the first apostle, right, with Jesus Christ. Like, what do you write after that? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just really, I mean, it's daunting, right? So everything else seems like almost child play.
Well, you must have a lot of research left over too. Do you plan on collaborating on anything in the future to add on, or different points of views, or?
Yeah. I don't want to hide the ball, but yeah, Steve and I had a really great conversation the other day about how much of all of this is already done. The storyline. Oh my goodness. When people read it, especially if they're students of the gospel, I'll digress for just a second, but getting the storyline right was so hard. I mean, you can't just go pick this up somewhere. The four gospels are not chronologically synced. They're all true and accurate, but they don't tell you when these things happen. When one appears in John, but it hasn't been in Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or whatever. So how do you know? And that was one of the greatest struggles we had, was getting that research done. That's the part that hung me up for years. But once we had that part done, to get back to your question, is there other? Yeah, we were talking just a few days ago after one of these other interviews, and I said, what about John? What John's next? I mean, I've been warned by theologians and so forth that John is so deep and he lives so much longer or whatever. But, John lived through the same experience. And yet, if you interview four people who witness a great event, they all four still lived it differently. And there's a different experience for Benjamin Franklin than there is for John Adams, than there is for George Washington, than there is for Thomas Jefferson. But they all lived through the experience of giving birth to a nation. Good job, by the way. But, these guys, these people, these women, they gave birth to Christianity, which 2,000 years later is 10 times older than the United States and 10 times bigger in terms of its international worldwide influence. If you just want to count people or dollars or head count, that's a big deal. And so all of their stories are great stories. All of their stories are different, even though it's the same set of events, because they all saw it from a different set of eyes. And so we talked about Peter. Steve started to see his head nod. He started saying, yeah, John, we can use John. John's now watching Peter do all this stuff. And I said, we just went on and on. I said, okay, we got to quit. We got one book at a time. But long answer, sorry. But yes, very much there's a lot of other stories and perspectives and material here. And Steve, I know you've got something to say to that.
No, I just, to piggyback on that, it's exciting to think, here it is, you learn about this protagonist, Simon Peter, and the arc of his life, right? To go from a brass fisherman over to, the first pope. I mean, it's just amazing what this man accomplished by the grace of God. He was chosen. But by all accounts, he was a bit of a knucklehead, right? He was a brash fisherman, the whole thing. So I picture telling these biblical stories with Jerry from John's point of view, but John now looking at Peter and just shaking his head like, man, what is wrong? You know what I mean? But of course,
it's going to over and over. He's got to look at him and go, man, did you not hear what Jesus just said? I mean, dude, what are you thinking?
Right. And that's what I love about this book, right? And hopefully, who knows? I mean, it becomes a series. But for me, what I love is the humanity, right? We all know, to Jerry's point, the stories in the Bible, right? But they're somewhat two-dimensional, if we're being honest. 3 or 4 sentences and you're done. And then what we do is we go in and do the research on that time, 2,000 years ago, and say, this is exactly how they, how they dress, what they eat, all this. So you put all that context on it, and suddenly it comes to life. still by, you know, driving through the characters. So that's the exciting.
That is really exciting. I just like all the personality that I get from these characters and just the way you talk about them and wrote them. It's just like this complete world. It's amazing what you guys have been able to research and put together. And I think I'm going to jump into some pre-submitted questions so that I get some time for that, because we did have some that came in before the live. And while I'm doing that, I just want to remind everybody that's watching, please remember to pop in your questions and comments, and we will be checking for those periodically. So I have Bonnie Jean Yepson Weinman. She submitted a couple questions in advance. So her first question was, you've already kind of touched on this. If you want to add some more, how do you come up with your stories? So if you had anything you wanted to add, I know you've touched on it a lot.
Yeah, so this was Jerry's passion, right? This was his vision. When I went down to Alabama, it was me sitting and listening to, hey, this is who Peter is. This is who Andrew is. You know, this is who John is, right? And then we start to work on, and again, everything starts from the character, right? Everybody's going to know what the plot is. The difference here is there's an arc on one character, right? So it's the evolution of a lifetime. And, you know, I don't want to steal Jerry's thunder, but he often talks about, you know, this isn't Jesus snapping his fingers, right? This is a man who's working. He's a work in progress. And if you can't relate to that, you can't relate to anything, because I'm a work in progress. Every time I think I'm making progress, I'm taking 2 steps back, right? And asking God for forgiveness and keep moving forward. So it's that type of story. But I love being able to relate to an apostle now that I couldn't before.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that the relatability of these guys is what I was really going for in telling the story, because I mentioned earlier, you know, she said, how do you come up with your stories? This story is something that I've looked for all my life, trying to get an understanding of. And I mentioned earlier, you know, a teenage scene where the wedding in Cana and the wine came up, and as a child almost, I mean, you know, when you're 16 or 17 years old, you're not exactly fully grown, but even, you know, 50 years later, with whatever alleged wisdom comes with all of that time, it still has a need to be told, a need to be understood. And why did these stories make it into the Gospels? Why are these the things that the people who wrote the Gospels thought were most important? I often point out, you know, some of this was accurately written as it went along, but much of it was the telling years later to record the record, because they realized there was going to need to be a recorded record. And so to understand how accurate and true it is, because it is accurate and it is true, it's just, if someone asked you about the events of your childhood or your college years or your high school years or whatever, and whatever it is you say is important and it needs to be true, you'll tell the truth and you'll get it straight, and you'll so the important stuff is what makes it into the record. And when you tell your kids something that happened to you as a child, you know, it's impossible for them to really relate. They want to, but they only in maturity, only in the fullness of time do people see the wisdom of their lives and what came before them and all that. And that's what I wanted to bring out in the story. Where does this story come from? I've always thought the story of Simon Peter was so compelling and so powerful, and he's such a normal, average person. Why would Jesus choose him? Because that's exactly who Jesus wanted. Because everybody here who's normal and average and reads this book should see themselves in it, because that's who Jesus was talking to. He knew the fancy people. He knew the people with degrees. He knew the smartest people and the best looking people and the richest people and the royal people and the powerful people. He didn't choose any of them. He chose the most common, average, everyday person who he values to be the leader. And you know, you will be Peter, he says to Simon when he first meets him. You are Simon, you will be Peter. You need to hear the tone sometimes, I think, when you read the Gospels. I don't know that the tone always comes through clearly, but that's what he said to him. He said, you are Simon, you will be Peter. What a weird way to introduce yourself to somebody. What did that mean? And it takes Simon years to find out. What was Jesus talking about? Wasn't that good? That's a good story.
It is. I love that that's your title as well. That has so much impact when you talk about it, and then to see it on the cover. I think that's really cool. And Bonnie had another question. So I know you touched on like storyboarding together. She wrote, do you write an outline or do the words just flow? Or like, did you have a mix of that when you were writing? Was it very strict to your timeline, or how did that combine?
Yeah, so we were, to Jerry's earlier point, accuracy of the timeline was pivotal, absolutely pivotal. So if you imagine the bullseye, right? The characters are in the middle, and then you start working your way out, right? Political context. Who are the Pharisees? Who are the Roman oppressors of that time, right? And then it's scene setting, and it's all of that, right? I think we were very structured in the beginning, and then what happens is you do all this research and you immerse yourself in the Gospels. We were studying antiquated maps, and then once you fill your head up with all that stuff, the writing really happens. But what happens is by that point, you internalize it. He and I can't imagine the hours that we've spent just talking about it. So that when it comes time to put pen to paper, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, and it was almost, it was funny. I talked to my brother before I flew to Alabama, and I said, the main thing is I need to understand the essence of what Jerry Lathan wants, right? And I got back on the plane to come home, and I'm like, I know what he wants. You know what I mean? And I really, at first you're like, oh, I don't, but I'm like, yeah, I think I'm the guy. And I think we're the two people to actually do this. So again, I mean, we immersed ourselves in film, books, I mean, you name it. But when it came time to write, we got at it.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Cause having that combination of knowing there's this timeline, but then you have so much personality that you've created for the characters. It almost feels like it would be a little bit of a fight. Like you can't really deviate too much,
right?
Like, did you feel a fight about that at all? Like, was it kind of this feeling of like, I want to do this, but I can't?
No, I don't. A lot of it was, if you think about what was left out, right? So how many miracles did Jesus perform, right? So these are all conscious. There was nothing that was not intentional. Right? Everything was, are we going to cover this? Are we going to cover that? How deep are we going to go into this? And it was striking the balance between historical accuracy to include the timeline versus let's make this human. Let's make it real. Like you're walking with it. But now I'm the 13th disciple and I'm kind of hanging out with Andrew and Peter. So there really was us striking that balance. Right? And I think that's what makes this book unique versus anything else that I was doing. I know Jerry's got even more, more research involved.
Yeah, Heather, I'd just add that how did it develop, I think, is the essence of that question, and how did it come together? And I remember, I think Steve will confirm, there were more than a few times when I would tell him, no, stop. Peter doesn't get it yet. He's not Peter. He's not Peter yet. He doesn't understand yet, because the tendency for anybody who's been brought up in faith and around the church and what have you is to think that, well, he's Saint Peter. He's the founder of the church. He's the first pope, if you're Catholic. He's all these. No, he was a guy who was confused. He was an average, regular guy and all this kind of stuff for a long time. And even though Jesus is right there in front of him, it takes a while. It takes a long while. In fact, quick story, a friend of mine had tried to read the book, and I sat down and had lunch with him one day, and he said, I can't finish it. I can't take it. I can't read it anymore. And he's talking about the suffering Peter's going through after the denial. And I remember I looked at him and I said, my friend, I've never seen him cry. He's 80 years old. And I looked at him and said, brother, you need to finish the book. The great part's coming. There's forgiveness and love and resurrection. It's called sweet redemption for a reason. So I'm not giving away the ending. Right. Everybody kind of knows what happens anyway, but it doesn't matter. Even if you know, when you read it and you get into it, I mean, I've had friends tell me they read it. One of Stephen's friends says he reads it every week and he weeps every time. He reads Sweet Redemption every week, and he does it because it's good for you. It's good for you to know that no matter what you've done, Jesus loves you. He's always there waiting for you. Redemption is there. And it was important that Peter suffer for his flaws, for his denial. That's important. He didn't just become, you're Peter. You will be Peter. but you are Simon, and you'll be human for a long time, and you'll have mistakes. And so the storyline and the development that Stephen's talking about, and many times along the way, I had to say to him, no. See, he doesn't understand yet. He doesn't understand yet. He doesn't understand until he's on his knees on the beach, and Jesus asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And he's finally offended in the third ask. That's when he comes together. That's when Jesus says, "Then you go do your job. I gave you a job. I've trained you for 3 years. Now get back to Jerusalem. Do what I said. I'll be there. I'll bring the Spirit. All of those things that we all know happen. But that's how it comes to all of us at some point. That's how it all comes to us at some point. We finally realize we don't know what to do until we listen. Listen firmer than we listen better than we have been. And so I think Stephen would tell you that, yeah, more than a couple of times I said, no. He doesn't understand yet.
Slow your roll. Slow your roll.
Yeah.
Because I got to tell you, and it kind of played into the process as well, right? Because, as I'm pounding away on the keys, right, I'm moving toward a goal, right, with the ending, and we're going back and forth with it. But it was really wild because I'm learning, obviously I'm learning as I go, right? He's, we're back and forth in dialogue constantly, but I think it helped the book as well. It really did, right? Because, we use certain vehicles, like, for instance, Peter's wife. She's a huge character in the book. And the Bible indicates that he had a mother-in-law, so therefore he had a wife. They don't name her in the Bible. We don't name her in the book. But she is an amazing, every time they go back to Capernaum, he's obviously unpacking everything with his wife. So there's certain tools that we used to strike that balance and to kind of bring you into his heart and mind. But being able to slow the process, because it took Peter, probably till Pentecost, right, when he received the Holy Spirit, to even understand what was going on. It was good, right, that we had slow it down, and the end result, I think, will show.
Yeah, that's an amazing collaboration to be able to have those conversations and be like, this is what he would have been feeling. We got to slow it down to this and really focus on that.
Right.
Because there is you have the timeline of these things, and you guys have done such an amazing job of putting in that empathy and the people to be able to follow right along with it and feel it and put themselves in those shoes. That's amazing. Like, just to hear that back and forth that you had to create that beautiful combination of writing. I love it. And I've got some more questions that came in advance as well. I have a bunch from Sharon. Sharon actually won a digital copy during your launch day takeover post, and she's
good.
loving the read, and she's going to be putting a review in soon. And she has so many questions. She's so excited. Yeah. I know she's watching live right now. She hasn't commented yet. So everybody watching, remember, you can throw in your comments and your questions, and we'll throw yours in too, so we can ask your questions as well. So Sharon realized that you gave special thanks to the guides and researchers in the acknowledgments. And she's wondering if they wanted to see the book before it was published, after they had given you all of that collaboration as well.
No. I asked questions, and we presented it to people who were theologians, Bible students, pastors, just dedicated Christians who believe they understand and know the Gospels. And the one thing I told everyone who was a contributor or a beta reader or a researcher was, please make sure I'm accurate. Please make sure if there's anything wrong, there's no pride of authorship here. What I want most of all is to make sure that we get this right, that we can make the case that every word is true and as accurately as we know how to depict it, portrayed. So no, nobody said, we want to know if you're going to get this right before we'll lend our name. No, that was not an issue.
And if I could jump on that just briefly, right? It's not like everybody knows going in, right? So, hey, listen, here's the manuscript. You got 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then we're going to convene via Zoom. Come on the meeting. We have right brain people, left brain people, everything from attorneys to artists. And it's wild to sit there and listen to what somebody picks up on versus somebody else. But the whole time, Jerry and I are internalizing that. But it's baked into the process that they truly don't have a say. They're contributing, and they get nothing but our gratitude for it. But it's not a democracy. So in the end, the acknowledgement is say thank you, right, for helping to contribute to this overall work. But they're a piece. They almost at the end they can't keep it, right, to make sure that we get it done. But from there on, it's not. There's no vote on this. When we
one other little thing just pops in mind to answer her question. One of the guys, I won't name which one, but one of the guys that I named reached out to me and said, I don't think you should name me because I don't think I did that much. And I said, no, I know how much you did. I know how much context you helped me with. I don't know how much. I mean, it was very, very early, 10, 12 years ago, his piece. But I didn't know the things that you told me until you told me. And then that led to the next thing, and that led to the next thing, and the understanding of Koine Greek, if you want to follow puzzles and figure out who I'm talking about. But his argument was, you shouldn't credit me because I didn't do anything. So, oh, no, yes, you did a great deal. You did a lot. You moved me to the next place and the next place in my research.
That's awesome. And then I want to make sure I get to all of her questions because she did have a handful still. She was wondering, are there still original writings from the two scribes that you wrote from, and what did they actually create them with?
The two scribes that we wrote from, I'm not sure what that means.
Okay.
If she's asking a question about the earliest manuscripts, I can give you a quick. The earliest manuscripts that still exist, they're just fragmentary, but the earliest papyri and leftover earliest papyruses, and some of the stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I've gone to Israel and seen. Some of that, there's enough to confirm the essence of it all, but there's no original full manuscript of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John or anything. There's only pieces and parts that in a physical record survive to today. But there's a place called St. Catherine's in the Sinai Desert that my friend I just referenced told me about, and I was not able to go there, but I was able to access their archives and see some of the earliest manuscripts. And the dates of the earliest manuscripts are pretty widely agreed now upon by theologians and early New Testament researchers. Mark is probably written first in the early 50s, 52, 54, 56, followed quickly by Matthew, then Luke and John. Finally, I've referred to in other interviews to John as the cleanup gospel, because John knows all the stuff that the first three said and hasn't said them yet. And so he adds some things to the story. But anyway, maybe that answers her question.
Okay, that sounds good. And like I said, I know she's watching. So if you meant something else, please throw it in the comments. Beside the two chosen ones, how many others also followed on the 3-year trek? She's also wondering.
As far as the characters go, talking about the apostles?
I think she's asking just maybe even within your research.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question, Heather.
Okay. Yeah, she's saying beside the 12 chosen ones, how many others followed the 3-year trek? So I don't know if she's wondering.
The 12. Okay. I thought you said the two chosen.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the 12. Yeah. I mean, he had an entourage. There were other disciples, and there were female disciples, right, which actually played a very prominent role in Christ's ministry. And I think we brought that to the surface as well. That's something we definitely highlighted, whether it was John and his mother or it was Mary Magdalene, Mary and Martha from Bethany. So they all rise to the top, and you kind of see the role that they legitimately played. They were. I mean, the 12 were the 12 that he chose, Simon being the first among them. But there were many other disciples.
Yeah, and just quickly add, if you want to look at the sequence of them, they're in the storyline. The timeline, there's, of course, the big four, which is James, John, the brothers, Andrew, and Simon, the brothers. Before they ever get to Cana, before they get to Nazareth, they pick up along the way Philip and Bartholomew, or sometimes known as Nathaniel. I've never quite figured out why he's called two names, but at any rate, Jesus tells him that he saw him and he gave him a vision under a tree. And Nathaniel's like, wow, I get it. Later, he's called Bartholomew. But anyway, so that's the first 6 that are at the wedding in Cana. Well, actually 5, because James wasn't there. And that's in the book too. You got to look for it. But James has gone back to fish. And then they head to Capernaum. A little bit later on, we start to add the other guys, including first of all Matthew, I think, and then the rest. But those things are all fleshed out in the book. But the 12 are then joined by many, many others. And as much as we can, we add a little bit of color around them. But they're, secondary. They're figures in the crowd for the most part.
Yeah, you get a 2020, right? 2020 vision on the first 4, and then it starts to become hazier, right? Like
Right. If you had too many like main focus on a character, it probably would get too crowded, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's diluted for sure.
Yeah. She had another question, which again would probably be more like research. I don't think this was mentioned in the book. But she said she thought she heard a long time ago that one of the apostles was called Doubting Thomas, which is where the saying comes from. And she was wondering if across your research you came across that story, if that's real, or if it was just something that she heard and misunderstood.
Yeah, it's definitely real. Jerry, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it comes from the second appearance in the upper room after the resurrection, when Thomas meets with the rest of the group and says, they all say, we've seen Jesus, he's alive. And there's been multiple sightings by then. And he says, I won't believe it unless I see him. And I put my hand, put my finger in the hand and the side of his wound and so forth. So yeah, Doubting Thomas is clearly in the first 3 synoptic gospels. I'm sure, I can't remember if it's told in John, but Jesus comes up again to the upper room, into a gathering of all of the major disciples and all the other followers. There's probably 100 people around. It's a pretty big place. And he says, Thomas, you said you don't believe, so come here. I want you to believe. And then he offers us something wonderful. All of us, he offers us something wonderful. After he tells Doubting Thomas, who's got to see it and touch it and believe it, he said, blessed are you who see and believe, but blessed more are those who will not see, and yet they will believe. Paraphrasing. I'm not claiming to quote the Bible directly, but that's for all of us. We haven't seen, but we still believe. And so he's saying even more blessings to them. So that's a good thing. That's good for us.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then I'm not seeing any other live comments or questions. So everyone get your questions if you have any in that you would like to. I did want to ask a last few questions on the way there. So I know you guys have it available in hardcover and Kindle, and you were thinking about also adding audio. Are there any updates on the audio version coming out of You Will Be Peter?
I hope it's going to be out before Christmas, but I don't know yet if that's going to happen. My agent has told us that he's still trying to get that booked in studio and so forth, but it'll be close. If it's not out by Christmas, it'll be out by the first of the year, or very soon, very, very soon. So there are definite plans, commitments to be out on audiobooks soon.
Which will make a perfect Easter, listen, right?
That's right.
Easter gift. Right.
That's right. We're going to get to that. We're going to still be here for Easter.
Yeah, we are.
But Christmas is a great time to buy this book.
Yeah. And we'll be here next Christmas too, Heather.
Yeah, the story's not going to change. It's still going to be there.
Yeah.
I know, right? I kind of came out of hiding for you, Stephen. I haven't done an interview in over a year, so.
Yeah, and don't think I don't appreciate that. Believe me, I was telling Jerry that we're in good hands, and we're grateful.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad you guys wanted to hang out with my book club.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. Let's see. So you also both have film experience, which I think is so cool to come into writing something together. I'm wondering, like, because you have that experience, when you were writing, did you have any characters in mind that you're hoping maybe will one day be in a film adaptation of this book?
Yes. Yeah, Peter is one of the greatest characters that's ever lived. The stories of great people and the biographies of great people have always fascinated all the rest of us. And so if you accomplish something amazing in your life, or something amazing happens to you, even if it's bad, people have a really keen interest in seeing the story, reading the story. I mean, that's why we love biographies. Somebody who has an impactful life. So I cannot imagine a more impactful life than the Simon Peter, who Jesus picks to found the Christian church. And I always say, whether you believe it or not, it's been the most important institution ever founded in the history of mankind. It's been here for 2,000 years. 4 out of 10 people today alive clearly affiliate with it. Nothing rivals it in endurance, in impact, in importance. And so the story of the person who was at the center of founding that has got to be one of the most interesting stories of anybody who's ever lived. And that's Simon Peter. So yes, it's a great story for a book. It's an equally great story for film or television or something like that, that for people to see it and experience it. And people have been looking for an understanding of this story for 2,000 years. Hopefully we're just one more generation adding to one more telling that helps tell the story to even more people. So yes, it's clearly a film adaptation idea. It always was.
Fantastic. Where would you like them to follow you so they can keep up with those updates? I know you have a website for your book. Any other?
YouWillBePeter.com. So, if you can go there, basically all the vendors, anybody who's selling the book from Barnes and Noble, Million, Amazon. We also have the endorsements out there. There's an excerpt. It's kind of a one-stop shop, and the guy who designed it did a fantastic job with it. But yeah, we're all over the place. We're doing as much radio and a lot of the online stuff. We also have partnered up with Providence Book Promotion, so they're doing a virtual tour. So we get reviews coming in from that. But as you know, Heather, right? Books are still sold word of mouth, right? And social media has become that word of mouth. So for Jerry and I, it's really about getting as many people as we can to read it so that they can start talking about it. And him and I can, head back to the cabin.
Yeah. Yeah. So if it touches you, if you read it and it touches you, tell somebody, post a review, tell your friend, tell somebody you love. I've thought about it over the last 25 years. I'm not that big of a reader, but pretty much every book I've read was recommended to me by somebody that I believed and listened to, a friend, somebody who was close to me that thought they knew me, and they would say, you should read this. And a lot of times I did. If this book helps you, if this book touches you, then why don't you do that? Why don't you tell somebody else to read it? Share it with them. You'll feel better and they will too.
You have some amazing reviews on this book that I saw on your website. They're just amazing. They blew me away. Where can people share their reviews that will be most helpful? I'm thinking probably like Amazon, social media. Do you have any suggestions?
Amazon's the big one, right? But if you're going to Amazon, if you could, drop the same, do a copy and paste into Goodreads, Barnes and Nobles. So wherever, iBooks, wherever you purchase your book, I mean, that's the way to do it. Again, it's generating that conversation, right? Because the praise is nice. I'm not going to say it's not, but the conversation's better, right? So it's, the other night I presented and somebody came up and said, "Oh my God, I love the book. You guys did a fantastic job." I appreciate it. Versus, let's have a conversation about it. And hey, I'm going to share this with my brother who's going through a tough time. That's where we want to get. You know what I mean? We want to get fun.
I think what's great about that is a lot of people. Yeah, the best review, one of my favorites I always go back to is a good friend of mine who I admire. I mean, this guy's a decorated officer. He's a colonel. He's retired. He's airborne Army career. He's a hero. He's the kind of people we celebrate. And I asked him to read the book, and I said, write me a little review or whatever. And the words that they're actually on the cover, he said, reading this book made me a better man, a better father, and a better Christian. And I just thought, wow, drop the mic. That's the kind of reviews that you're referring to. And so if it has that impact on you, then you should tell somebody, and you should share it with somebody you love, somebody you care about. Tell them this book mattered to you, and they should read. There aren't that many books that help you or change your life or touch you. You read a lot of things, but there aren't many in that group. And I hope for people, I know for some people, and I hope for many, many more, that's what this book does.
And I'll tell you, being involved in the process of producing this work, right, it just confirmed for me that we're all connected, right? And none of us is alone. And I think when people read that, they feel that. I mean, I have a next door neighbor. I'm walking my dog 2 days ago, lost her grand. They're grieving tremendously as a result of it. But she talked about the book, and she said, there's a certain healing quality to it, but she doesn't feel alone during the time, right? Because she feels close to Jesus and the apostles. So, I mean, you can't more than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's good.
That's so touching to know that your work is doing that. That's amazing. Right. And I think that also your conversation will probably help a lot of people, because I've heard a lot of people tell me, I don't write reviews because it's intimidating. I don't know what to say. But really just the simple, like, this is how it made me feel. This is what it did for my life. It doesn't have to be a novel, just one sentence even. It means so much.
It could be 5 words. Right. This book touched me. I hope it touches you.
Yeah.
I loved it. I hope you try it.
Yeah.
That's it. It doesn't have to be anything big. We don't need something that's going to be published somewhere. Just speak your heart. If it touches you, let somebody know.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I mean, your sentiment too of, what it's doing to help people. I think my very last question for you, I feel like when we talked about the menu before, Stephen, it sounded like that book was kind of this love letter to your family a little bit from yourself. Yeah. And I'm wondering, like, is there anything in there from both of you in this book that's kind of a love letter to your families, to your readers? What do you want to leave them with?
Well, if you don't mind, Jerry, I go first. So, and I've yet to share this. Jerry knows it full well, but I haven't shared this publicly yet. But as Jerry and I were writing this book, my mom was in the process of dying. And my mom, when I served in the first Gulf War, she would write constantly, and she would say, "Keep the faith." She'd always sign it, "Keep the faith, love, Mom." I didn't really understand what that meant, truly, from her perspective at the time, right? So as I'm reading this, the last chapter I read to her was Palm Sunday. And my mom passed away on Good Friday at 3:00 in the afternoon, right? So the idea that I was able to share this with her and read it, I mean, it's just, I went from a man who was a believer to somebody who absolutely knows, you know what I mean? And I understand full well that my separation from her is temporary, so it means a great deal to me on many different levels.
Wow. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm so glad you got to share this with her.
Yeah, there was a sense of peace, I think, for the two of us, right? Because I was basically telling her everything I've ever done, who I am because of you and because of the faith you instilled in me. By reading this, this work that I'm participating in with her, it was confirmation. Like, it was beautiful. The timing couldn't have been any.
Yeah, well, let me just say, Stephen has told me that. We've never shared that before, but I can't imagine a more poignant or touching or human, wonderful thing for a mother who read to their child as a child, to have your child read to you the faith, the truth, something that he worked on. So she can leave this world knowing she did what she set out to do. How could you make it any better? What a sweet, wonderful story. Stephen, I'm glad you shared that, because you haven't said that in public anymore before now.
Yeah.
What a great thing, for a mother to hear her son read back to her like she read to him as a child, and to read to her that he understands and the faith and truth of what she taught him is deep in his heart, man, that's wonderful.
It's so touching and meaningful, and oh my goodness, such an amazing thing to leave this on and leave people with, and know that it helped more than just the readers. It's helping you as well behind the scenes, and it's so meaningful. That's beautiful.
We are definitely. I mean, we're connected deeper than I ever imagined, right? And it's just wild to watch. I mean, Jerry and I think, have done our job, and now there's somebody who's in charge that's taking care of it from here, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's I just feel the privilege of being able to have a part of this. That's what I think. People say, "What a great story!" So it's not my story. I got the privilege of helping to tell it.
Right.
And I think it's time, and I think it's the right way to get it to people who need to hear it. And good for them. Good for them. I don't want any credit for that. I'm just helping. I hope it helps. I hope it helps people. I hope it touches people. And I know it does. I know it does. I believe it. It's true. It's already doing it.
Yep.
And that's wonderful too, because it'll last for a long, long time. This is timeless. This will be read. One of the core books that I read that really helped me with this, one of them was written in 1892, and one of them was written in 1948 that helped me with the timeline. Those people are long gone. But what they did helped immensely come together to make this possible. So
absolutely.
I don't know. I don't need to know where this goes. It's just out there and it's good.
Yep.
And I'm trying to do my part.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing. I can't thank you guys enough for sharing about your writing journey and your story with us. And everybody, please go check out "You Will Be Peter" by Jerry Lathan. It's 11 o'clock. London. Check it out. "You Will Be Peter" by Jerry Lathan and Steve Manchester. Thank you again so much for being here with us, guys. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And keep your eyes peeled for the giveaway that will come later on. And we'll be in contact with you, whoever wins the giveaway. Fingers crossed. Good luck, everybody. Everybody, thank you so much. Have a happy holiday season.
Thank you, Heather.
25 too. That's
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.